All right, and joining me today is Jim Miller, who fights Gabriel Benitez at UFC Vegas 84. That fight is on January 13th. So, Jim, I wanted to start by talking about UFC 300 because a lot has been made of you fighting on this big card coming up in April. You know, a lot of fights being named for that fight card already. And here you are fighting in January, 3 months before, kind of a riskier move in all of the grand scheme of that. Was it sort of always the
Yep.
plan to take one at the beginning of the year before that card?
No, the plan was to fight in like November. So yeah, I was trying to get on a card, potentially maybe the MSG card, or one of these one of the December cards. In my mind, that played out a little bit better for me, a little bit easier. You know, my last fight was beginning of June, so I'm not a huge fan of these like the long layoffs. You know, so a majority of the ones that have come in my career have not been because of me, unfortunately. So um, uh, I feel like I'd have a lot more fights, believe it or not, if I got to fight at the pace that I wanted to fight at. So for me, like it doesn't 3 months in between is fine. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to come to this fight. You know, have a good showing and basically just get right back into it and be you know, slowly, you know, step it back a bit and then just slowly again prepare for another fight. So you know, that's the way that I used to get to fight in the UFC. So you know, yeah, it's fun. It's exciting.
That's awesome to hear. Now, you mentioned, you know, kind of having the right amount of time. Is there a right opponent for UFC 300? I know not looking past Benitez. We're not doing any of that. But
Mhm.
is there a guy on your mind that you ideally would like to have in a perfect world?
Um, I mean, in a perfect world, I'd get my opportunity at Connor, you know, but it, there are a ton of guys. You know, I mean, it's going to be a big event. Um, you know, I've said it plenty of times. I'll fight at 55, 70s. I mean, uh, I'd even fight an 85 pounder, honestly. But it, yeah, like I don't really care. Every opponent has an opportunity to show off my skill set. So, you know, it'd be fun to get in there with somebody that's been here a bit, and you know, is one of these guys that's uh, that I've seen fight a bunch. You know, the Tonys, the Matt Brown, stuff like that. But yeah, I'd take Patty in a heartbeat too. So, you know, really, it's like I said, it's just an opportunity. That's the way I look at it. So um, yeah, either way, we'll figure that out. You know, January 14th.
For sure. Now, I wanted to ask you, you know, you're going to be the only one, if you do pull this off, to fight at 100, 200, and now 300, unless Brock Lesnar comes back by some miracle of the world, which I'm assuming is
Yeah.
not happening. Looking back at 100, you know, the fight with Mac Danzig, or at 200, even for that matter, with the TKO win over Taki
Mhm.
Gomi, do you have fond memories of those fight cards? Are they more special than maybe some of your other memories?
Um, I mean, not necessarily. You know, it was cool to be on UFC 100. That was my fourth fight in the UFC. To be on a card with the names that I was on a card with, like that was big, you know, to be on there with uh Hendo and you know, I'd fought on the card with Bisping at that point, but you know, like all these guys, it was pretty cool to be part of that, you know, like and here I am 4 fights in. I got to meet Brock Lesnar, you know, at that event. So yeah, it was neat to be a part of. I think that the best thing about, you know, 100 was that you know, this is back. We're talking back in the day, and I think there's probably a decent amount of fans that don't understand what MMA was back in 2009. There was no streaming, right? Like it was like you had to go onto the UFC website and like download the fight or whatever afterwards. And you know, my fight with Mac was it was a bloody one, and it didn't get shown on anything. There wasn't a TV deal, there wasn't a streaming service deal. So that for quite a bit of time, that fight was the most downloaded fight off of UFC.com because everybody wanted to know why there was so much blood on the octagon. So yeah, it was a cool little thing to happen, from that fight. And like I said, it was neat to be a part of such a big event. UFC 200 was a little bit more of a milestone for me. Like that I was in a really tough place in 2016, outside the octagon, and to go in and fight Gomi, who when I started training and fighting MMA was the number one ranked lightweight on the planet, and to go in there and to fight him, and I had been diagnosed with Lyme disease right after, or technically right before, UFC 196, and to be kind of like starting my journey out of Lyme disease, which took a lot longer than I anticipated. That personally, that was a pretty big milestone for me to go out and fight the guy that I was training to fight, in 2005 when I started. Like, this is the guy that I wanted to fight, and then to also like start overcoming this illness that had been kicking my ass for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Now, I want to bring it back to what you said about the streaming era and sort of people being able to see your fights all the time. And not that you're on the prelims all that often anymore, but, people being able to see all of the fights, so to speak, versus back in the day, we had the Facebook prelims back in the day for a brief moment. We had the pitch dark prelims that you'd never see all the way back in the day. What is it like for you as a fighter and fan interaction nowadays? How is that so much different from when you were there? Do you notice it? Do people seem to know people's names better? What's it like for you to have lived through all that?
It's weird. It's weird because it's like, I think what ends up happening now is that it's so easy to see the short little like couple seconds of a finish or of a good technique that people, myself included, I do it all the time as well. Like, I don't catch the fights all the time. The last thing I want to do is stay up, past midnight. I'd rather be in bed at 10 o'clock. So I don't see a lot of fights, and I feel like there's a lot of fans that don't see a lot of the whole fight. And we're just picking out those moments. So if you're in a good, tough fight and there isn't one of those spectacular moments, a spectacular finish, I feel like it kind of just gets a good performance might get glossed over. So it's a weird spot. It honestly is, because it's so accessible, but because it's so accessible and because of the way that social media has maybe taken advantage of the way that our brains work, right? It's like, like I said, myself included, all I want to see is 10, 15 seconds. So it's an odd spot. It's an odd spot because I don't really know how to describe it, because it's like not everybody's not watching the whole fight, so it's like there's a lot that goes on when you land a good punch or something like that, knock somebody out, but it's like, well, there's also build up to that, like as a student of the game, we should be watching that stuff too.
Do you feel like you've gotten a bigger pop in your recent fights then? Because, not for anything, you're 4-1 in your last 5, 4 finishes, 2 performance of the night bonuses. Have you felt like you've gotten like sort of a bigger pop and more hype behind yourself following those, big, exciting finishes that do wind up on social media?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's when I've being able to have those moments, those whatever you want to call them, viral moments or whatever, during fights. There's definitely, it does help. It does help, the push and the, follower count and all this stuff. But yeah, it's just cool to go out and perform,
For
like
sure.
that's the biggest thing that that I'm concerned about is going out there and living up to the expectations that I put on myself.
For sure. Now, we just talked about you being 4-1, two performance of the night bonuses in that 5 fight span. We're talking about a fight with Mowgli Benitez that should you come out on
Mhm.
top, we're talking 5-1 fight at UFC 300. You've kind of hinted at, like UFC 300 being close to the end, but with a
Mhm.
run like this, with a 5-1 run, or if should you win it, you have, put these back to back, a 6-1 run. Do you
Mhm.
feel that pull that you have to still keep going, that you have to make one more crazy run at this at the end of your career?
Yeah, yeah. uh, like I put it out there that yeah, I wanted to get to UFC 300. This is like a few years ago, and at that time it was like okay, like if I can drag myself to that line, we can hang them up. And there's parts of me that's ready to, but like you said, if I go into 300 5-1, that's a really tough decision to make. So, like I'm figuring out this whole thing of like training and competing as an older athlete. My plan was never to be fighting at 40, 41, so like I had told myself in the beginning 34 is it, so um we're well beyond that. But yeah, like still even what I want, right? Because I want to have these couple fights where it's like, yeah, I'm in the gym all the time, and I'm living that lifestyle again, because there is a lot that can pull me away from training. Um, but the hard part too is that like nowadays when I'm training, it. I have to focus on training. Like that has to be like there's nothing else going on, and it makes it hard to do the other stuff, get all the other stuff done. So just it becomes a balancing act. But yeah, maybe we just see how it goes, and uh, uh, like 300 will be 44 UFC fights. Well, 45 is a nice cleaner number, and then if you're at 45, 50 is right around the corner. Uh, but yeah, there's like I said, there are definitely parts of me that's like ready. Like I'm excited. I'm excited to make that decision and to know that I'm going into my last fight. Like that, the idea of that gets me excited. Um, there's like there's a lot of like not to be like cheesy, but like there's a lot of gratitude in the fact that I still get to compete and have figured out a way to still perform, at my best, even though like what I am now has changed from what it was. Like I mean, I was ranked in the top 10 in the world, and before the UFC rankings, the some of the independent rankings had me in the top 5, and uh, I was a different fighter then, and I know that I'm not that guy anymore. I feel like I could beat that guy, but he's got some weapons that I don't have anymore, so I've had to change things, and now I have weapons that guy doesn't have. So yeah, it's fun to get to fight. Like I get the opportunity. I've earned this opportunity to continue to do it, and by making good decisions and using my head, um, and being a little lucky, I've been able to still, be competing at a high level towards the end of my career. So let's see what we can do with it.
I like that. Now, you mentioned in there changing a little bit of the way that you prepare, and some
Mhm.
of it being the mental focus on it. It's got to be the only thing on your mind. Are there different things physically that you feel like you've had to kind of do in order to make sure that you're ready come fight night and not, infinitely banged up?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I have a list, right? I didn't write it down anywhere, but I have a list, right? Like my four priorities when I'm training for a fight. Uh, Priority number one is to be healthy, right? Like if I'm not healthy, then I'm going to not be able to fight the way that I'm capable of fighting, or like has happened even recently, is I create bad habits. You know, if I'm dealing with something that's affecting the way that I train for 6 to 8 weeks before a fight, it's gonna come out in that fight. You can't just turn it off. If it's only 2 weeks prior to the fight, well, maybe you get into the octagon and you kind of forget that, oh, my knee's fucked up. Or, like my neck's been banged up, so I haven't been wrestling all that much, but I'm still gonna go out there and do it. Where if you have that time of having to deal with that change and that game plan difference, it will affect you negatively. But yeah, being healthy is number one. Number two is being in shape. If I'm healthy and in shape, I'm trouble for anybody. Uh, and then it comes down to my game, like doing the things that I'm good at and drilling the things that I'm good at, so that they it, they happen faster. They happen without having to think. If I hadn't really been training, and then maybe the guillotine's not going to be as fast, or the left hand's not going to snap as quickly. And like for me, the last thing is what my opponent brings to the octagon. Honestly, like I'd rather, it's like, oh well, this guy whatever throws a lot of let's say I'm fighting Barboza, and it's like he throws a lot of spinning kicks. I don't like having training partners that are throwing things at me that don't have a pad on them. Because the last thing you need to do is get cut before a fight. So like I'm not just going to have people spin and trying to take my head off with wheel kicks and stuff like that. I'd rather just be healthy, in shape, and working on my stuff, and then we'll trickle it in there. We'll get it, because what seems to happen more often than not, especially these days, is that my opponent changes. So you spend 2 months preparing for a very specific fight plan and all this stuff, and then at the drop of a hat, now you're fighting somebody brand new. So yeah, like I think that training as a veteran fighter, um, because it's not just the age, it's the miles as well, right? It's the repetitions, it's the multiple training camps that beat you up. It's all about compromise and kind of figuring that stuff out. So um, I know that I can hop on the bike, in the other room and get some work in if other things are banged up. So that's what I do. If I need it, if I need to stay away from the young guys and banging myself up at a live practice, then I make that decision and I hop on the bike and I get some conditioning in.
I love it. I love it. So I want to talk about that matchup with Benitez too, because
Mhm.
obviously that's part of what brought us here. Before I do, I'm a guy who loves hearing the story of MMA nicknames. You're a guy who I've heard, I've seen fight a billion times. And
Mhm.
up until like, I think it was like probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, didn't hear a
Mhm.
nickname in between Jim and Miller, just heard Jim and
Yeah,
Miller. Then we
yeah.
started getting A10 in there. Do you mind giving us the story of when that popped in and why that popped in?
Um, I haven't done a very good job of it, but branding. you know, it's probably been said plenty of times about me, and I think I'm recalling one specific thing. My name's Jim Miller, so it's not catchy. It's not something that's going to stick in your mind. So yeah, so it was kind of just one of those things like, hey, let's figure something out. And I do have all this, I don't have it out yet, but I've got all these apparel stuff that I was gonna do and all this shit, but you know uh training gets in the way. But yeah, uh it was like my brother Dan, we always called him the Beefalo. uh so he's just big and doesn't know his own size and stuff like that. So and he's a little more docile than a buffalo. But so I was like, well, if he's the beefalo, then I'm the warthog. I'm short, smelly, hairy, and ugly, but not to be fucked with. And I was like, well, do I really want to be a warthog? It's like, well, so I always loved the A10. Like growing up, I had a poster of it on my wall and stuff, and they're pretty badass. And I kind of think it, it's a good example of me. I'm not the most nimble, fighter out there, but I could take a beating, and I need to be respected because I will mess things up if given the opportunity.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Now, let's talk about Mowgli Benitez here. He's a guy who has kind of taken to going out on his shield, right? His last
Mhm.
two losses by brutal knockout, his last three wins, get this, brutal knockout, right? So,
Mhm.
like, he's a guy who goes in there and just absolutely throws. Is that the kind of fight you like to be looking for at this stage in your career? Is that something you like more when you were young? How do you feel about him stylistically here?
I love it. I do well in those fights. So the more forward he wants to come, the more aggressive he wants to make that fight, the better I do. So uh stylistically, I'm excited for it. He's definitely a great striker. And he does have the ability to land some submissions. But I've been proving my striking ability in the last couple of fights, and I think when it hits the mat, I will have a clear advantage. So, um, yeah, I'm not afraid of the firefights. So, the more sketchy it is, the better I seem to do.
I love it. Now, I usually like to end these things with a prediction. You seem pretty loose about how this gets done, but do you feel like logic one here for me? January 13th. How do you see it getting done?
Um, I you know I see this one being a clash, and being violent, because he doesn't back down. So yeah, we're gonna go in there. We're gonna punch each other. We're gonna kick each other, and at some point, I'm gonna make him make a mistake, and I'm gonna capitalize. I try not to see too much, especially when it comes to the good stuff for whatever reason. A little bit of a, I like to be hard on myself, and uh, I prepare to get through the tough times. And I know that when I have those opportunities, I will pounce on them. So uh, yeah, I'm seeing a tough, violent, fast fight, and I'm gonna come out with my hammers.
All right. Well, you're here to hear first, folks. This has been Jim Miller, who fights Gabriel Benitez, UFC Vegas 84. Once again, that fight, January 13th. Jim, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.